If you think you truly know your family, this story will prove that the most painful secrets can hide for decades. Stay until the end because what you discover about betrayal and sacrifice will leave you breathless. Subscribe for more stories that make you question everything you believe. My name is Alex Morrison, I'm 38 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had the perfect family. We live in Portland, Oregon, in a cozy craftsman house where Sunday dinners were sacred and family meant everything. It was a warm March afternoon when everything shattered. My mother, Helen, 72, was in her usual chair reviewing old documents from the attic. My older brother Rick, 42, sat across from me, drinking beer and laughing at some story his wife Sophie was telling. Rick had always been my hero. Successful engineer, perfect husband to Sophie for 15 years, father of 3 amazing kids. He was everything I aspired to be. "Boys, I need to discuss something important," Mom said, setting aside a manila folder. "What's up, Ma?" Rick asked, but I noticed tension in his voice. Mom walked to the antique cabinet and pulled out yellowed papers. "Rick, do you remember when you sold Grandpa's property in Hood River 10 years ago?" Rick went pale. His beer bottle trembled slightly. "Yes." "Why?" "Because here are the original deeds, and something doesn't add up." She opened the folder, revealing several documents. Her usually steady hands shook. "According to these papers, that property wasn't just yours, Rick. It belonged to both brothers, you and Alex." I felt the floor drop beneath me. "What do you mean, Mom?" "I mean your brother sold property worth over $300,000 and never told you that half belonged to you." Rick stood up abruptly, but what he was about to say would destroy our family forever. Rick slammed his beer on the coffee table so hard, liquid splashed across the wood. His face had changed completely, no longer my protective big brother, but a stranger with cold, calculating eyes. "Mom, I don't know where you got those papers, but they're wrong," he said, voice attempting calm but clearly shaking. "Rick, these are the original documents Grandpa signed when he divided the properties. It's here in black and white. Alex was entitled to $150,000. My wife Sarah squeezed my hand. Sophie stared at her husband with complete confusion. "Rick," I whispered, hoping for a logical explanation. My brother looked directly at me, and I knew my life would never be the same. "So what if it's true?" he said with chilling coldness. "What would you have done with that money? Wasted it on more books or your useless art projects?" "Rick." My voice came out broken. "No, Alex. I'm the one who's kept this family afloat. I pay for Mom's medications, fix this house when it falls apart, cover expenses when you're playing teacher making pennies." Each word was a slap. Sophie stood up, clearly shocked. "Rick, how could you do this?" she yelled at her husband. "You stole from your own brother." "I didn't steal anything. I handled all the paperwork, talked to lawyers, negotiated with buyers. Alex didn't even know that property existed. Why give him money he didn't know he had?" "Because it was his," Mom intervened, her voice ice cold. "Because he's your brother." Rick laughed bitterly. "His brother. Right. The brother who's never contributed anything real to this family. The dreamer, the artist, the one who always needs taking care of." Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't believe these words came from my lifelong hero. I trusted you," I managed between sobs. "And I trusted you'd never find out," Rick replied with a cruel smile. At that moment, Mom stood up, and what she was about to reveal would change everything we thought we knew about our family. Mom walked slowly to the center of the living room. At 72, she remained an imposing woman with quiet dignity, but in her eyes was something I'd never seen, a mixture of pain and determination that chilled me. "Sit down, everyone," she said with authority that brooked no argument. "It's time you knew the complete truth." Rick tried to speak. "Mom, we don't need to make this dramatic. Be quiet. 30 years I've kept silent. 30 years I've protected secrets that have eaten me alive. No more." She returned to the antique cabinet and pulled out another folder, this one brown and even more worn. With trembling hands, she began removing old photographs and documents. "Have you ever wondered why your father left when you were so young?" The air grew thick. Rick and I exchanged glances. Dad had died when I was 8 and Rick 12, but we'd always been told it was a sudden heart attack. Mom, Dad died of a heart attack, I said, confused. Mom shook her head slowly. Your father didn't die of a heart attack, Alex. Your father left this house because I threw him out. What? Rick had lost all color. I threw him out because I discovered he'd been stealing money from the inheritance your grandfather left you boys for years. Her words fell like hammer blows. Money for your education, your futures, so you'd never want for anything. Sarah squeezed my hand so tight it hurt, but I barely felt it. My world was crumbling piece by piece. Your father had problems with gambling, drinking, debts. When his own money ran out, he started taking yours. Mom showed yellowed bank statements. Here are the receipts. For 5 years, your father emptied the accounts your grandfather opened for you. Rick had collapsed into his chair, head in his hands. When I discovered it, I gave him a chance. I told him to return the money and get help. Mom's voice broke slightly. Instead, one night he disappeared, took what little remained, and we never heard from him again. Why didn't you ever tell us the truth? Rick asked, voice barely audible. Because you were children. Because growing up without a father was painful enough. I wasn't going to burden you with the shame of knowing your father was a thief. And then she revealed Mom's second sacrifice, one that would forever change my perception of the woman who had raised us alone. Mom remained standing, gripping the chair back as if needing support for what she was about to tell us. When your father left, I had to decide between asking family for help or finding a way forward alone. Her voice was firm, but I could see tears forming. You remember your maternal grandfather had a very successful hardware store downtown? We nodded. I vaguely remembered Grandpa Joe, a serious but kind man who always smelled like wood stain and metal polish. What you never knew is that when my father died, he left that store to me. It was my inheritance, my security, my future. Rick slowly raised his head. What happened to the store, Mom? I sold it, Mom replied with simplicity that contrasted the magnitude of what she was saying. 2 months after your father disappeared. Complete silence filled the room. Even the neighborhood sounds seemed to fade. That store was worth a fortune, boys. With that money I bought this house, paid for your private schools, uniforms, books, medical bills when you got sick. I could afford piano lessons for Rick and art classes for Alex. I made sure you never felt your father's absence, at least not financially. Mom, I whispered, feeling like a spear had pierced my heart. But that's not all, Mom continued. That store was also the business my father expected me to keep in the family. His legacy, his pride, and I destroyed it to protect you. Sophie approached Mom and took her arm. Mrs. Morrison, you did what any mother would. No, dear, not any mother would have done the same. Mom shook her head. Many mothers would have found a man to support them, would have put their own happiness first. But I decided you boys were all that mattered. Rick stood and started walking toward her. Mom, I didn't know. You never said. Of course I didn't. I didn't want you carrying that responsibility, Mom yelled, stopping him with her gaze. But now it turns out the son I gave everything to, who I educated with values, who I taught about family importance, steals from his own brother. But what Mom revealed next made us understand that Rick's betrayal was even deeper than we had imagined. Mom returned to the cabinet and pulled out one final folder, this one dark green. Inside were more recent documents. Some looked freshly printed. Rick, there's something else you need to explain to your brother, she said, voice so cold it gave me chills. My brother stood frozen in the living room center. Sophie watched him with a mixture of horror and disappointment. Alex, do you remember 3 years ago when you lost your teaching job, when they said budget cuts forced them to let you go? Yes, it was one of the hardest times of my life. I had bills to pay, Sarah was pregnant with our second child. And who helped you during those difficult months? I looked at Rick instinctively. Rick lent me money, helped me pay rent for 6 months until I found work at the elementary school. How much money did he lend you? $60,000. He told me not to worry about paying it back, that we were brothers, and that's what family was for. Mom opened the green folder and pulled out several papers. Rick, explain to your brother where that money came from. My brother closed his eyes. and sighed deeply. "Mom, please, explain." Silence stretched for seconds that felt eternal. Finally, Rick opened his eyes and looked directly at me. That money was yours, Alex." I felt punched in the stomach. "What do you mean?" "When I sold the Hood River property, I didn't just keep your half. I invested all the money in bank funds. For 10 years, that money has been generating interest." His voice was barely a whisper. "The $60,000 I lent you was part of the profits from your own inheritance." Sarah stood up abruptly. "You're saying you lent Alex his own money?" "I thought it was better that way. Alex is naive with money. If I'd given him everything at once, he would have spent it badly." "Spent it badly," I exploded. "It was my money, Rick, my inheritance. You had no right to decide what to do with it, because you've never been responsible. Always dreaming, never seeing reality. Someone had to protect you from yourself." "Protect me? By stealing from me? By lying to me? By making me feel grateful for receiving my own money?" Sophie approached her husband with fury I'd never seen. "Rick, how much money is there total? How much really belongs to Alex?" Rick ran his hands through his hair, completely defeated. "With 10 years of interest, probably around $600,000. The number hung in the air like an exploded bomb. But the worst was yet to come. $600,000. The figure echoed in my head endlessly. For 10 years, while I struggled to make ends meet on a teacher's salary, while Sarah and I stayed up nights, worried about paying medical bills, while I borrowed money to fix our old car, my brother had been managing a fortune that belonged to me. 600,000, I repeated, barely processing the information. "Rick, do you have any idea what that money would have meant to my family?" My brother didn't respond. He sat with his head in his hands like a man watching his world destroy itself. Sarah approached him, trembling with rage. "Do you know how many nights Alex didn't sleep worried about money? How many times he had to ask you for help feeling like a failure?" "I didn't want him to feel that way." "Liar!" Sophie yelled at her husband. "You enjoyed feeling superior. You loved being the successful brother rescuing the poor brother." Mom had finally sat in her chair, but her expression was harder than I'd ever seen. "Rick, for years I've watched you show off your house, your cars, your children's private schools. Meanwhile, Alex and Sarah lived paycheck to paycheck, feeling inferior. But I helped them. Whenever they needed something, I was there. With his own money," I exploded. "All this time, you've been giving me charity from my own inheritance." I approached my brother, feeling rage I'd never experienced. "Remember when my oldest got pneumonia and needed expensive medication? Remember how I humiliated myself asking for your help?" Rick looked up, tears in his eyes. "Alex, remember how you told me I needed to be more responsible, think better about my children's future?" "I didn't mean—" "Liar! You meant every word. You enjoyed every second of making me feel like a failure." Sophie backed away from Rick like he was a poisonous snake. "I don't know you. 15 years of marriage, and I'm married to a thief." Mom stood up slowly. "Rick, I want you to leave this house." "What? Mom, you can't." "I can, and I will." Her voice was steel firm. "I sacrificed everything to raise you with values, to teach you what family, honesty, loyalty mean, and you've betrayed it all." Mom looked at him with chilling coldness, and the words that came from her mouth would destroy Rick forever. Mom walked slowly toward Rick. Despite being much smaller, her presence filled the entire room. When she spoke, every word carried decades of wisdom and pain. "Yes, you're my son, the son I nursed, cared for when sick, defended when other kids bullied him." Her voice trembled with contained emotion. "You're the son for whom I sold my inheritance, gave up my future, sacrificed everything I had." Rick tried approaching her, but Mom raised her hand, stopping him. "But you're also the man who betrayed his brother, the man who slept peacefully for 10 years, knowing he'd stolen $600,000, the man who watched his family suffer and did nothing with their own money." "Mom, I can return all the money. I can fix this." "Can you return 10 years of humiliation? Can you return the nights Alex didn't sleep worried about money? Can you return the dignity you took by making him beg for what was already his? Tears flowed freely down Rick's face. "Mom, please, I'm your eldest son." Exactly why it hurts more. Mom turned away, unable to keep looking at him. From the eldest son, you expect protection of the younger, care, example. You did exactly the opposite. Sophie, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "Helen, I didn't know any of this. If I had known—" "I know, dear, you're a good woman, and I know you've also been a victim of Rick's lies." "I didn't lie, I just didn't tell the whole truth," Rick exploded. Sarah approached him with controlled fury, more frightening than any scream. "Rick, for years we've come to your house and seen how you lived. Your 3-story house, your new cars, Cancun vacations every summer, your children's private schools. What's wrong with that? You paid for it all with my husband's money. While we shopped at thrift stores, you dressed at designer boutiques. While our kids went to public school, yours had private tutors." Rick stood up, desperate. "But I worked for that money. I invested it, made it grow. With capital that wasn't yours. It's easy to grow money when you start with stolen funds." Mom returned to the room center. "Rick, I'm going to ask you one question, and I want total honesty. Ever, in these 10 years, did you feel remorse? Ever wake up thinking about what you'd done to your brother?" Rick stayed quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his answer was like a dagger to all of us. "At first, yes. But later, I thought it was best for everyone. Alex doesn't know how to handle money. I was protecting him from himself." Rick's justification was the last straw, and what happened next marked the definitive end of our family. Rick's words floated in the air like a final confession. I was protecting him from himself. At that moment, something broke forever inside me. It wasn't just the betrayal, the stolen money. It was the arrogance, the complete lack of remorse, how he'd turned his crime into a favor. I approached my brother slowly, the man who'd been my hero, my example, my confidant, the man I'd admired for 38 years of my life. Protecting me? My voice came out so low everyone had to strain to hear. "Rick, do you really believe you were protecting me? Alex, you've always been naive with money." "Shut up. For the first time in my life, I'm yelling at my big brother. Don't tell me who I am. You have no right." Rick stepped back, surprised by my reaction. "Want to know what I would have done with that money? I would have bought a decent house for my family, put my kids in good schools, taken Sarah to the doctor when she started having those headaches we never checked because we couldn't afford tests." Every word was a slap to Rick's face. "I would have opened that bookstore cafe I always dreamed of, studied that literature masters I could never afford, taken my children to see other countries, expand their minds. Alex, I'm not finished, but above all, brother, I would have slept peacefully, knowing I owed nothing to anyone, that everything I had was from my honest work." Tears ran down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of liberation. Instead, for 10 years I've slept feeling like a failure, feeling I wasn't good enough to support my family, feeling eternally grateful to you for being the successful brother who rescued me. Sophie had covered her face and sobbed silently. "You know what's the most painful part? It's not the money. It's not the 10 years of lies. It's realizing that the brother I loved most in the world, the man I admired more than anyone, never really existed." Rick collapsed on the sofa, completely defeated. The Rick I knew wouldn't have been capable of this. The Rick I loved would have come to me the day he found those documents and said, "Brother, I have a surprise for you. Alex, please. No, no more please. No more lies. No more brothers." At that moment, Sophie made a decision no one expected, one that would forever seal our broken family's fate. Sophie wiped her tears and walked slowly to the living room center. For all these years, she'd always been a quiet woman who preferred avoiding conflicts. But in her eyes was determination I'd never seen. "Rick," she said firmly, "I want a divorce." The silence that followed was absolute. Rick stared at her as if he hadn't understood the words. "What? Sophie, you can't be serious." "I've never been more serious. I can't be married to a man capable of stealing from his own family. I can't raise my children thinking their father is a hero when he's actually a thief." "Sophie, I'm the father of your children. We've been married 15 years. And for 15 years you've lied to me." Her voice cracked slightly. "You've made me an unknowing accomplice to something horrible. Our house, our children's schools, our vacations, everything built on stolen money." Rick approached her, desperate. "But we can return the money. I can fix all this." "No, Rick, you can't fix who you are." Sophie turned to Mom. "Mrs. Morrison, I didn't know any of this. I swear by my children I didn't know." "I know, dear. You're a good woman. This isn't your fault. But it's my responsibility to do right now that I know." She turned to me. "Alex, I'll make sure you recover every penny that belongs to you. I'll request a complete audit of all our assets." "Sophie, you don't need to do that." "Yes, I do. I need my children to know that when their mother discovered the truth, she did what was right. I need to sleep peacefully, knowing I'm not an accomplice to theft." Rick grabbed her arm. "Sophie, please, think about the kids. Think about everything we've built together. What we've built is based on lies, and our children deserve to grow up with truth." Mom approached Sophie and hugged her. "Dear, you'll always be welcome in this house. You and the children will always have family here." "Thank you, Mrs. Morrison." Sophie looked at Rick one last time. "I'm getting the children, and we're going to my sister's. Tomorrow I'm seeing a lawyer. You can't take my children. They're my children too, Rick, and I have the right to protect them from a father who's been lying their whole lives." Rick fell to his knees in the living room center, and his final words would finish destroying any possibility of reconciliation. Rick slowly stood up, like a man defeated by his own decisions. For a moment, I thought maybe he'd truly apologize, maybe find the right words to begin healing even a small part of the damage he'd caused. But when he spoke, his words finished destroying any hope that remained. "Fine," he said bitterly. "I'm leaving, but I want you to know that everything I did thinking about this family." Mom turned toward him in disbelief. "Are you still going to justify yourself?" "I'm not justifying myself, Mom. I'm telling the truth." Rick walked toward the door, but stopped to look at us one last time. "Alex, you never would have handled that money well. In 5 years you'd have spent it all and be in the same situation you're in now." "Rick," Sophie whispered, horrified he was still talking. "And you know what's most ironic about all this? I was the one who kept this family together for 10 years. I paid Mom's medications when she got sick. I fixed this house's roof when it collapsed. I organized all the family gatherings, all the celebrations. With my money!" I yelled at him. "Money you would have wasted. At least I used it for important things, to keep the family together so we'd all have happy moments." Sarah stood up, shaking with indignation. "Rick, do you really not understand what you did wrong?" "I understand I'm the villain in this story. I understand everyone will remember me as the brother who stole. But in my conscience, it's clear that I kept this family afloat when no one else could." Mom walked toward him slowly. When she spoke, her voice was sadder than angry. "Rick, standing here right now, after knowing all the damage you've caused, do you still think what you did was right?" Rick looked directly into her eyes. "I think I did the best I could with the information I had." "Then," Mom said with chilling finality, "I really lost my eldest son 10 years ago. I just took all this time to realize it." Rick opened the door. Before leaving, he turned to me one last time. "Alex, when you realize not everyone in this family was willing to make difficult sacrifices, maybe you'll understand what I tried to do for all of you." "The only sacrifice you needed to make," I replied, "was telling the truth." Rick left the house and closed the door behind him. The sound of the gate closing echoed like the definitive end of something that had been beautiful for many years. 3 months later, after lawyers and documents and bank accounts, I recovered the $600,000 that belonged to me. With that money, Sarah and I bought a small but decent house. We put our children in good schools. I studied the master's degree I'd always wanted, but the most important thing I bought with that money was something priceless: my dignity. Rick never came back. Sophie divorced and moved to another city with her children. Sometimes we receive a postcard, always signed, "With love, the family you still are." Mom lived 2 more years. In her final days, she told me something I'll never forget. "Son, sometimes families break not from lack of love, but from lack of honesty. Your brother loved you, but he didn't respect you. And love without respect always ends in betrayal. Today, when my children ask about their Uncle Rick, I tell them the truth. I tell them that sometimes the people we love most are capable of hurting us most deeply, but I also tell them that honesty and respect are the foundations of any relationship worth having. And when they're adults, I hope they remember that their father chose painful truth over comfortable lies. Because that, in the end, is the only real inheritance we can leave: integrity. This story teaches us that trust is like glass. Once broken, it never fully heals. Families are built with love, but maintained with honesty and respect. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to remember that truth, though painful, is always better than lies. Subscribe for weekly stories that help us reflect on what truly matters in family relationships.